Yesterday, I watched day 1 and 2 of the State of Georgia versus Edrick Faust trial. This is currently taking place in Athens, Clarke County, Georgia, and it involves the 25-year-old homicide case of Tara Louise Baker. She was found in her home on January 19th, 2001, when firefighters responded to a call for a structure fire. Once they entered the building and entered her room, they quickly realized that it was more than just a fire. Investigators arrived and quickly realized that the fire had been set intentionally. The fire was actually set on Tara's bed, and her body was found in between her mattress and footboard. She did have a cord wrapped around her neck. They ruled her death a homicide and investigated, but unfortunately, the case went cold for over 20 years until 2023, when a law was enacted that required law enforcement to reopen cold cases, and this was called the Coleman-Baker Act, and the Baker is for Tara Baker. So Tara's case was reopened, and the evidence collected at the scene was re-examined, including the DNA evidence. When they ran that DNA evidence through CODIS, they got a hit for a man named Edrick Faust, and that is who is currently on trial for Tara's murder. So there are 12 counts on the indictment. I'm not going to read them aloud, but as you can see, Edrick Faust was charged with some really violent, just really heinous crimes. And you can tell that Tara Baker went through a lot that morning, and it's just really, really sad. It's just a really, really tragic case. The case sounded pretty straightforward to me after just doing like a little bit of reading, but then I remembered this is the state of Georgia, and the state of Georgia is unwell. So a few minutes into the prosecutor's opening statements, I realized that this case was a mess. So the first problem I had was with the ADA. His name is Chris Bolden, and he smacked his lips throughout his entire opening. And no, that has nothing to do with the law, but it was annoying. And so were the words that were coming out of his mouth. He was saying things like they found no fingerprints, only her blood was found at the scene, her laptop was the only thing missing, DNA swabs had been mislabeled. They collected a window frame from her apartment that day, but that window frame is now missing. They didn't find out how the suspect got in or out. They had a CODIS match to Edrick Faust, but that was the first time his name had come up in the investigation in 23 years. So they did need to get a buccal swab from him, which they did. They learned that Faust lived in the neighborhood. Tara Baker also had a boyfriend, and they did find his DNA on Tara Baker, and they knew that in 2001. Investigators interviewed Chris Melton and let him know that his DNA was a match to DNA that they got from Tara's oral swab, and he said that makes sense because he and Tara had been intimate a week prior. They also let him know that they found his DNA on the rectal swab, but they did not find a DNA match to Edrick Faust on that rectal swab. But according to the prosecution, it was clear that Chris and Tara were not intimate in that way. They were not doing backdoor stuff. And that rectal DNA was due to drainage. A few other things to note from the state's opening regarding the scene. The doors were all locked. So the fire department had to kick the door in to gain entry to the apartment. They had to kick Tara's bedroom door in as well as her bathroom door because, again, all of the doors were locked. The suspect did use the stove to start the fire, and when the fire department arrived, they saw that the knobs to the stove were all removed. They were on the counter to the side, so they did have to put those back on in order to turn the stove off. So the defense attorney, Ahmad Cruz, gets up to start his opening, and he lets us know that there was no evidence of Edrick Faust found in Tara's apartment. There was actually no evidence of any Black person found in Tara's apartment. And he didn't stay in the neighborhood like the state said. He actually lived in a different area with his girlfriend, but his stepmom did have a house nearby Tara. There was a neighbor that said she saw a white man running through her backyard around the time of Tara's death, and he had the same color hair as Chris Melton, who she knew of because he was Tara's boyfriend. Tara Baker was beaten. She had a lot of bruising and black eyes. 2 days after her death, Chris Melton had defensive wounds on the back of his hands, which the defense showed us photos of. Of course, the state conveniently left that out. Chris Melton told police that he had not seen Tara in 10 days, and then they brought up the DNA evidence, and he said, oh yeah, no, we actually had intercourse 6 days ago. We learned that in addition to Chris Melton's DNA being found on the rectal swab. There was one pubic hair found on Tara Baker's backside, and once they tested that DNA, Chris Melton could not be ruled out. But, the state said he was cleared because he had an alibi.